Right, so we are on for Tributaries of Eden, Parshas Chayei. We're on page 108, 109 in the Chumash. For a verse which, at first glance, doesn't seem like such a big deal, but yet the commentaries seem to make a very big deal about this verse. And by that I mean the opening verse in the story of Eliezer going to find a wife for Yitzchak, and eventually he finds Rivka. The parsha opens with what would be a good opening line of a book. Va'avraham zaken ba bayamim. Avraham was older. He was coming with days, meaning he had a lot of years behind him. V'Hashem berach es Avraham bakol, and Hashem had blessed Avraham with everything. So, it would be the same as, at least that's the way we understand it. Once upon a time, there was a very old man with a lot of money. This old man had a young boy, etc., etc. That's the way you would start a story. But the commentaries seem to read a lot more into this verse than just Avraham being old and having a lot of money. And with that, that's what we're going to try to figure out. What makes them see more in this verse? So before we even begin, let's just recognize that the sentence structure is difficult. Avraham Zaken, Avraham is old. Is he older than he was before? Sure. By how much? Right? So doesn't the Torah already claim he was old 4 decades ago?
What age?
This is after the death of Sarah, so if she was 127, he's 137. But when he was 99, Sarah was laughing because he's old. So it's not like he became old over here. And then what does this mean, ba bayamim? He's coming with days. He's got a lot of days behind him. And then Hashem blessed Avraham with everything. Is that something new? Is that something that has just happened? If anything, Avraham just experienced one of the greatest tragedies of his life. He just had to bury his wife. That would be a terrible experience. And at that point we're saying Avraham now had bakol, he had everything. What does that mean? So the Ibn Ezra, and as we explained, the Ibn Ezra is one of the Pashtanim, one of those people who focuses on the pshat in the verse. The Ibn Ezra says, Avraham had bakol, he had everything. He had orech yamim, long life, v'osher and wealth, v'kavod and honor, ubanim and children. V'zu kol chemdas ha'adam, which basically is the list of what people really want. Avraham had everything. A long life, lots of money, honor and prestige, and children. Now the Ibn Ezra is...
So the wife doesn't count.
What?
The wife doesn't count.
Right, that's what it would seem, right? If that's all that the verse is saying, and that's the difficulty we raised. If anything, right before he lost his wife, before he thought he was going to have to bring up his son, during those 37 years, after Yishmael and Hagar have been kicked out, somewhere there it should say, at that point, life was perfect. That's what we should say. But that doesn't appear there, it appears here, so clearly there's something more that's wanted here. But at least the Ibn Ezra, the way he reads it, is that this verse is saying Avraham had everything, and obviously we're going to have that problem, which is Avram's actually pretty upset right now. Yitzchak is inconsolable, as we find that he doesn't become consoled until he gets married. It says he brought his... And even then, it was only when he saw that she reminded him so much of his mother, and she had the same miracles happen to her. All of this was a healing process for Yitzchak. So Avram and Yitzchak are both, each one mourning in their own way. Avram didn't get remarried until Yitzchak was settled down. So why are we saying Avraham had everything at this juncture in time? So the Rashbam, another one of the Pashtanim, one of the commentaries who tries to explain things on a very simple level, says that what we mean here is like this, that the Torah is trying to explain to you the significance of the adventure Eliezer is about to go on. Because he is sending someone, he's sending Eliezer, to go find a wife from a very far away place. We're talking, he had a miracle that he arrived very quickly at Kvitzas Haderach, but he wasn't expecting that. They were expecting a very long journey. And so why would he do that? Why wouldn't he just take one of the local girls? And the answer is that Abraham felt that these were Canaanites, these were people who were not fitting to be married to his son, to Yitzchak. Therefore he felt, and so the Torah, says the Rashbam, the Torah wants to stress for us and make sure we don't misunderstand. Don't think, because you read the previous parsha, Abraham takes that approach of ger v'toshav v'nochi imachem. Like, I'm a stranger, but I'm a resident. And you see that Abraham has to bow before the people of the community, and he has to make a request, and he ends up paying a lot of money just to be able to bury someone. You might get the impression, says the Rashbam, he didn't quite say all those words, but you might get the impression that Abraham felt limited in what he would be able to get if he was to try to marry within the local people. So that's why, says the Rashbam, the Torah gives us this introduction by saying that Abraham had everything. He had money, he had wealth, he had prestige, he had honor, he had a good name, and all those things, and therefore he could have married anyone he wanted to, but still, Abraham went to a faraway place. That's how the Rashbam explains this verse, and again, we're just in the simple pshat, the simple reading of the verse, that the Torah is setting us up for the story about to come, to try to explain why Abraham sends Eliezer to such a faraway place. Your question still stands. Why would the Torah use the word bakol? But according to the Rashbam, you would answer, it doesn't mean he had everything. It means that there was nothing which would have been an obstacle for him to have been able to marry off his son to anyone, the king's daughter even. But Abraham felt that we have to go to a place where the people are more proper. That's in the realm of Pshat. However, the Gemara takes this to a very interesting place. Gemara in Bava Basra, Daf Tez Zayin Amid Beis, reads as follows. My bakol. What does it mean, bakol? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shahaisa lo bas, Abraham had a daughter. He had a bas. Acherim omrim, and Acherim tell us, Bas hosa la Avraham, ubakol shema. Avram had a daughter called Bakol. V'Avram zakin ba bayamim, v'Avram berach, Hashem berach as Avraham Bakol, and Hashem had blessed Avraham with a daughter called Bakol. And at first, when you hear this, it sounds like our sages are misinterpreting a verse. That is what it sounds like, right? Bakol, this would be our aunt Bakol, right? That's our grandfather Yitzchak's sister. Where is she in the rest of the Torah? And why does she only appear mentioned after the death of Sarah, who would have been the one to have had this girl? It seems so strange to suggest that in the house of Abraham there was actually a young girl. We have no clue, no mention of this anywhere, and even later we don't find the Torah telling us anything more about it. It just seems difficult to read into the verse that, just Rabbi Yehuda says she had a daughter. Okay, so you had a daughter, so we're telling you that you should know that Abraham and Sarah had this girl. But Acherim reads it into the verse. Hashem blessed Avraham Bakol was actually the name of this young girl.
Could it mean both meanings, since we're supposed to try to have a boy and a girl?
Right.
So that's everything he says.
Right. So it does seem like that is one of the explanations. That the commentaries explain that they find it difficult that Hashem would not allow Avraham to fulfill what would later be the mitzvah of Pru'ervu, which we're told is a machlokas, whether it's two boys, or it's two girls, or it's a boy and a girl, But with only having one child, if they had this special miracle, why didn't Hashem? We don't find anyone suggesting that Yitzchak was born with a twin, like we find of the laters. Yosef had two sons, Ephraim and Menashe. So maybe he held like the opinions that two sons are enough, right? You could work around that. But with Abraham, Hashem blessed him. He should be missing that. The answer is he must have had a daughter too. And Bakol is just telling you that for some reason her daughter is not important, but he had everything he ever wanted, and therefore he had. It's interesting that the Ibn Ezra says that Hashem blessed him with everything. Orach Yamim, Osher, Kavod, and Banim. Uses the term plural of Banim, meaning there must have been other children that Avram and Sarah had, and we're assuming it was at least one girl. But to say that Bakol was her name is a little more difficult.
Why wouldn't Ishmael be considered one of the Banim? And that's two of them then. That's Banim, that's plural.
Right, although to say that's what it's referring to, I guess you could say that. But, that's just in the Ibn Ezra. But it would still be difficult because, he and Sarah only had one child. So if you say that he fulfilled the opinion of having two boys, one with Yitzchak, one with Ishmael, even though we say, Ki b'Yitzchak yikarei l'chazara. Okay, so you can answer that, but still, you see, our sages were suggesting that Avram and Sarah had more than one child, which is fine, but to say her name was Bakol. Then we have two more opinions. Rabbi Lezer Hamodai Omer, it's the Geninus Hoisa Belibo Shel Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu had a clairvoyance. Shekol Malchei Mizrach Umarav Mashkim and Lepischo, which made all the kings of east and west come knocking on his door. That's what Bakol means. Bakol means, it refers to not an extra child, but Bakol means Avram had the clairvoyance. In the language of the Maharsha, the way he explains it, he says, Lishol mimenu eitza, people came to him for counsel. Berova techuna v'hativuna, he had a perfect construct of understanding and a perfect depth of understanding. Avram had such a clairvoyance, he was the world's great counselor. And so all the kings of the world came to visit him, and that's the great Bakol. Bakol is the blessing of clarity of understanding. In terms of, he doesn't say. He's just saying Bakol means everything, so meaning that there's something more here that we haven't been told about. So what else would he be missing from everything? And the answer is this clairvoyance. That's the next opinion. The final opinion, even more difficult, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, Even Toiva ha'isetaluya betzavara shel Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu had a precious gem hanging around his neck. Avram Avinu wore a necklace. Shekol chola haroa also, that when a sick person would look at it, miyad nisrapeh, he would immediately be healed. That's what Bakol means. Bakol means that he wore this necklace around, he had this gem around his neck, and people would be healed. And of course, the commentaries say, well, then why is he sick? That Hashem has to visit him on the third day of the Bris Milah. What happened to that stone around his neck? Why didn't it heal him? We'll get to that in a second. Ubishah sheniftar Avram Avinu min ha'olam, and when Avram Avinu left the world, Tala Kadosh Baruch Hu begalgal chama, Hashem hung that stone on the sun. He hung it on the sun.
Are these Gemaras said with Ruach HaKodesh? Where do they come up with these things?
Right, and what's more, we don't even know what they're saying. Right? Yeah, absolutely. And there's always clues, and they break it down. Where did they see this? But what does that even mean? Hashem took a stone and hung it on the sun. Now the sun has a necklace.
Maybe he gave the sun the healing power that the stone.
So the Maharsha says that there isn't even a stone here. It means it's all a metaphor. Our sages don't talk in literal terms, they speak in metaphor. It means Hashem gave Abraham knowledge, natural knowledge, of the healing characteristics within the world of nature. And then when someone who deserved to have this knowledge left the world, and now there was no one who deserved to have this information, at that point God didn't want to take it away from the world, so he bestowed the Son with those healing powers of Avraham. Exactly what you were suggesting. Meaning that when we read these Gemaras, we need to stop thinking the way that children read the Gemaras, and there might have been a literal interpretation of it as well, but the point of it is that Avraham was a healer. So the two explanations Bakol were either he was the great counselor of the world, or Bakol means he was the great doctor of the world. Or Bakol means that he had a daughter called Bakol, which hopefully we will explain in a little bit. Tanu Rabbanan, our sages teach us. Shlosha itiman HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olam hazeh me'ein olam haba. There's three people who in this world were already living me'ein olam haba, a semblance of the world to come. This verse, which we're explaining, Va'avram zakein ba ba'yamim, Hashem berach es Avraham bakol. The word we're focused on is the word bakol. Many people would be surprised to hear that you actually cite this word bakol very often. And I'm not going to put anyone on the spot to see where you say the word bakol, but in your benching, right? Exactly. We say to Hashem at the end of the Harachmans, we say, Hashem, please bless the owner of this house, the Baal Habayis Hazeh, and Balas Habayis Hazeh, they, Osam, Vezbeisam, Vezaram, Vezkala Shalahem, they and their household, their children, everything that belongs to them, us, and all that's ours. Kemoshen Izbarchu Aviseinu, Hashem, bless them like you blessed our forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. When you gave them the blessings of Bakol, Mikol, and Kol. So Cain, so too, Yivarech Hosanu, bless us, Kulanu Yachab Bevracha Shlema V'Nomar Amen. So this comes from a Gemara in Bava Basra, where the Gemara says that there were three people whose lives were so good that they had a little Olam Haba while they were in Olam Hazeh. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Because Avram it says, Hashem berach es Avraham bakol. By Yitzchak it says, V'ochel mikol. And by Yaakov it says, V'chi yesh li kol. So Avram said bakol, Yitzchak said mikol, and Yaakov said kol. And we could spend all day just talking about the difference between each of those three terms. But as the commentaries explain, everything? Nobody has everything. You can't have everything. Everything. How could you have everything in this world? But yet the Torah does use that word, bakol, mikol, kol, for Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Says the Gemara, that means that they were living a other world kind of life in this world. And the question is, why? Usually we understand that if a person is done with this world, they go to the next world. And that's where we say, Hayom lasosam umachar lekabel scharam. Today we do the work, and tomorrow we receive the reward. By tomorrow we mean the next world. You don't get reward in this world. You certainly don't get next world's reward in this world. In other words, you don't get to live your olam haba while still in this world. But three people did, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why? Where this is going to lead us is to understand that what Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov did brings them to a whole new status of something which none of us will ever do. That's what the Gemara says. There were three people who accomplished something. And what we're going to try to figure out, and that's why this verse is so important, because this verse is going to reveal to us information about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that are beyond what we would recognize had the Torah not told us this. To quote the words of the Ramban says on this verse, Hashem berach es Avram bakol, and I quote, here our sages are originating for us a very important concept by which they expounded upon the secret of the secrets of the Torah. In other words, if you would really understand this verse, you would know one of the biggest secrets of the Torah. Then he finishes his very long explanation that you should know. The Ramban is very stingy when it comes to sharing secrets of the Torah. Even when he shares it, it's in so few words and in such difficult words, and he actually says that in his introduction. He says, I'm writing the secrets of the Torah, because he was the first one to put out an open commentary with the secrets of the Torah in it. And he says, I don't want it to be touched by anyone who doesn't deserve, so I'm going to put it into such difficult terms that no one's going to understand it unless you already know it. Because if you know it, then you'll understand it. If you already know all the terms, all the terminology and things like that, yeah. So unless you already are initiated, you know he's saying something, but you don't quite know what he's saying. But over here, for some reason, the Ramban embellishes, goes for a whole page, just spilling out secrets. And he finishes this piece and says, if you know this, you'll understand many great secrets in the Torah. He says, and this one, referring to the Ibn Ezra, who claims to know the secrets of the Torah, because the Ibn Ezra always says there's a secret here, but it's never a secret. He says, who claims to know the secrets of the Torah, may his lips go silent when he dares mock the words of our sages. And therefore, I elaborated here to show what really is the secret of the words of our sages, so that no one should speak against the righteous. In other words, the Ramban saw this verse as an opportunity. It's hard to find a good example of this, but if, let's say, you open a riddle book, and I don't mean a children's riddle book, I mean one of these complicated riddle books where you need a notepad for each riddle. And someone opens it up and they say, this doesn't make sense. There's no. But once you see 2 or 3 answers, and you see how the lateral thinking and the clever thinking, and this is true of all such great puzzle books, once you see 2 or 3 of the answers, you say, wow, this is so clever, I want to try to figure out the rest. In the same way, if you look at the words of our sages, and all you see are these midrashim that are wild midrashim, Avram had a daughter called Bakol, that's all you see, you walk away saying, you know what, it sounds to me like our sages are just sitting around the table making stuff up. So the Ramban says, I'm going to pick this one example. I'm going to tell you the secrets of what's really going on. And then I want you to understand that every single one of their statements has just as many secrets. And the problem is, what always happens is, when someone reveals, he's like, okay, well, that explains that one. Well, what about the next one? Okay, so if I explain the next one, you'll say, well, what about the next one? I'm just giving you, it says the Rambam, one example where you see that people go, what are our sages thinking? Well, what do they mean, a daughter Bakol? And he tells us what it really means and says, now, please understand that all of them are like this. And if I wanted to, I could defend every one of the statements of our sages in this way. I'm just not going to elaborate every time. So what are the secrets? So what's the big secret that's contained in this verse? So we've skipped today. We went from Pshat to Drush. I'd like to go back to Remez. And if you like Gematrias, well, we're going to get to the secret later. If you like Gematrias, much better than the Bakol being 52, yeah. If you like Gematrias, it doesn't really get much better than this. If you don't like Gematrias, just tune out the math. And let's go straight to the explanation, which is related to the secret of what's really going on in this parsha. And the way it goes is like this. Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are not like us. Surprise. They were not just better people. They're not just more righteous people. They transcended humanity. And I'd like to explain that in better terms. At your sukkah, on the first day of Sukkot, everyone was visited by Avram Avinu. Did anyone here see Avram Avinu? If you did, don't tell me. Right? It's supposed to be a secret if you actually do see him. But what does that mean? Avram Avinu came. So there's a literal understanding of it, but there's a deeper meaning, which says that Avraham is no longer a person. Avraham has transcended to become a concept. And I'm going to explain what that means. Avraham perfected himself so much in the realm of chesed that he became the vehicle by which chesed is brought into the world. He is the pillar of chesed. And I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit later, but let's understand this, that we're all living off the chesed of Hashem. Why do we deserve chesed from Hashem? Because either we or the people in the world, and we are included within them, are doing chesed. That's the way the world works. If you do chesed, Hashem gives you chesed. If you do judgment, then Hashem brings judgment into the world where appropriate. It's based on what we do that we bring chesed into the world. Avraham was the greatest example of that chesed, and therefore for all time, he is the pillar of chesed. And when you perfect yourself in chesed to that extreme, at that point, you become more than just a human being. You become almost, and I use the word almost angelic. Almost, again, we don't make anyone any form of deity. But even as we say about Moshe Rabbeinu, he elevated himself beyond the level of human being to almost angelic. Isha Elokim, he's referred to. Avraham did so at least in one area, and that is the area of chesed. He was so perfect in chesed that he perfected himself. Now what happens to someone who perfects themselves? They're supposed to leave the world. But Avraham still had things to do. So we have a strange situation of someone who's done doing what he needs to do, and yet he's still in the world. That's a very, very unique situation. At what point did Avraham perfect himself in the midah of chesed? This is a tough one. If I would ask you, at what point did Avraham perfect his attribute of chesed? What would your guess be?
The war with the 5 kings and the 4 kings when he went and rescued.
When he risked his life for the war with the 4 kings, there's a better example. At what point did Avraham perfect himself in the attribute of chesed?
So when he brought up Yitzhak, he had already completed chesed and he took the...
Right. So the answer is actually right, that's right. The answer is the Akedah. Now, the Akedah is the greatest act of Gevura. Yeah, I know, but it's the cherry on top of all of his chesed. Why? Because if your natural inclination is for kindness, it's easy for you to do kindness. And who said you're doing it because it's the right thing to do? Maybe it's just what you like to do, or what's easier for you to do. All we need is to go to the person who's perfect in chesed and say, and if it was Gevura, would you be able to do it? And he does. That shows that all of his chesed is not just natural chesed that he desires, but it's to fulfill the will of Hashem, because you see that he was Vayechu Shneim Yachtav, he was just as excited by Yashkem Avraham Baboker to do Gevura. So then why is he doing all this chesed? Because he was actually perfecting himself in the realm of chesed, which is interesting, because the act of Gevura is now the proof that all of his chesed was real. So what happens is, at this point, this is right after the Akedah. This is after the Akedah, he comes home, and he has to bury Sarah's wife, and then the Torah takes stock and says, you should know, V'Avraham zakein ba'ba yamim, he was old, he was coming with his days, V'Hashem berachas Avram bakol, Avram was done. He was complete, he was perfect. At this point, he was living in the world to come, but we needed him down here, so he was still here. That is something that no person before, and only 2 people after him, Yitzchak and Yaakov, would accomplish. Yitzchak would perfect himself in the realm of Gevura, and at that point he was still around in the world to bless his children and do whatever else he needed to do, but he was done. And the same thing Yaakov Yaakov, when he comes back after the situation with Esav, after wrestling with the angel of Esav, at that point he was done. He was perfect. He had kol, yesh li kol, I'm done. But there was still stuff to do, and so they kept him around. All right, are we ready to take this to a higher level?
So when you say Abraham was done with chesed, that he had perfected himself, but then you said that the Gevura, he did it because Hashem told him. So what we should infer from that is all the chesed he did was because Hashem told him.
Right. So after all the chesed which he had done, he now needed to prove that that chesed was legitimate. And that one act of Gevura is a sort of, it gets rid of the last claim against the chesed of Abraham, which is maybe he's just doing all this chesed because it's natural for him and it's easier for him and all that. So that last argument is now gone with this act of Gevura.
But then you said, but he perfected himself to the extent with chesed that he could leave this world.
Right.
He should have left this world. But that suggests that he's not doing it for Hashem anymore, because if he perfected himself...
No, he's done. He was done work. He was done with doing his work. I mean, that's our job. Our job is to make ourselves into the best person possible and to do whatever we need to accomplish in this world. Avram accomplished what he needed to accomplish. That's Zakein Baba Yamim. That's a whole new reading of the verse, right? Instead of saying Avram was old. Not Avram was old. Abraham finished his job. Right? This is we're told whenever we're going to allow a substitute teacher to come in, we're told give enough work for 5 days. So that no kids can claim they're done, right? Because you're supposed to, we have so much work to do in this world, that for anyone to say, well, God, what else can I do? You got any more chores for me? Don't ever say that. But Avram did. He was done.
So why is that after the burial of his wife instead of before?
So what I'm saying is it's a result of the Akedah.
Right.
And so the Torah has to finish the story, and then the Torah takes stock of that story. Avram is really done, and now it's time to move on to Yitzchak.
So Chayei's death is part of the story.
Yeah. Okay. But this goes much higher than that. I've discussed this in a number of times. That this very strange Zohar. There's a lot of strange Zohars, strange statements in the Zohar, but this is about as interesting as it gets. The Zohar says that the 3 angels who came to visit Avraham, one of them looked like Avraham, the other one looked like Avram's son, Yitzchak, and the third one looked like Avram's grandson, Yaakov. Imagine that. Now clearly the Zohar would take the opinion that Avram knew they were angels. But could you imagine someone knocks on your door and it's your doppelganger? What would you say? He'd probably say to you, I'm you from the future, buy stock in Apple, right? That's it. Right? If someone would have come to you 30 years ago and said, buy stock in Apple and Windows,
so just
and
by coming back to you and telling you that, they are now changing the future and
yeah, maybe it depends. Assuming that there's enough of butterfly effect, possibly. Unless that happened the first time too, you just don't know about it.
Well, then you're just in a cycle and no one's ever moving forward.
Well, no. I mean, what if the whole reason why it's so high is because of the doppelganger? Who's going to show up in? Okay. We can argue Isaac Asimov. Okay, but that's what happened. And the question is why? Was there a shortage of disguises in heaven that they had to take the faces of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? And the answer is, angels don't get to choose their faces. Angels are a certain type of, I don't use the word personality because they're not persons, but they are of a certain character in heaven. When they come down into the world, they have the face which represents that character. Michael is the angel of Chesed. So when he comes down into the world, he's going to look like a person who had perfected himself in the realm of Chesed. That's why he looks like Avraham. Gavriel, as you can pick up from his name, Gavriel is a name of Gevura, of strength. He is the strength, the gevura, the judgment of God. So Gabriel, when he comes down into the world, he doesn't get to choose his face. He looks like what a human being would look like if they personified, pun intended, the concept of gevura. In which case, Gabriel looks like what Yitzchak looks like, because Yitzchak looks like what Yitzchak looks like. And the same would be true of Raphael looking like Yaakov. There's a fourth angel. Who's the fourth angel who didn't come down? That's an angel called Uriel Nuriel. He has two names, Uriel or Nuriel, which is right Milfanei Uriel Me'achorai Raphael. So the Uriel / Nuriel, which really means the same thing, the fire of God, represents the fourth leg of God's throne. That's David HaMelech, but David is not in the story yet. David is still by Lot and his daughters. So only 3 angels show up, even though there's 4 generals of God's army. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and David, represented up in heaven by Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Nuriel. Those 4 angels are representative. So if Nuriel would come down into the world, he would have red hair and whatever else and fine eyes like David HaMelech did.
Except that Yaakov wasn't born either.
Right, but it's not about that. He doesn't look like Yaakov. He looks like what someone who has perfected himself in the realm of Tiferes would look like. And Yaakov looks like someone who's perfected himself in the realm of Tiferes. You look like what you are. You look like your personality. We're not good at reading faces. But if you could read faces, Yaakov would look like a perfection of Tiferes. So when Raphael comes into the world, that's what he looks like. And that's where the word Tiferes even has the word Refuah in it, like Raphael. Okay. If I was to take one object in this world and associate it with Michael, what would it be? It's water. Water represents chesed in this world. The next one is easy. What would represent Gevura? Fire. Tiferes, what's a mixture of moisture and heat? Air. And Nuriel, David HaMelech, the bottom of the throne, would represent earth. Michael is the angel of water, associated with Abraham. Gabriel, the angel of fire, associated with Yitzchak. In fact, you may have even heard the famous medrash that says that when Abraham was burning in the fire, Michael said, "Let me go save him." And Gabriel said, "No, you're the angel of water. That's easy. Let's make it a bigger miracle and have the angel of fire put out the fire." Right? They're actually speaking in those terms. Raphael is the angel associated with air, and Nuriel is associated with earth. Okay. I'm going to suggest the gematria, which is suggested by the Imrei Noam, the Rebbe of the city of Jikov. Find that on the map. This gematria, I did not believe it when I read it. So I checked the numbers and they match. But please feel free not to believe me either, because this might be the best gematria you've heard today. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Nuriel. The names of the 4 angels, you can count it up later, and I'll give you the spelling if you want, is exactly 955. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Nuriel is exactly 955, which is, coincidentally, not a chance, the same gematria as Eish, Mayim, Ruach, Afar. 955. How did the Imrei Noam realize this? I have no idea. Who would ever think that they would be the same? But it's incredible that Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Nuriel, 955, Eish, Mayim, Ruach, Afar, 955. Because they are the angel of fire, water, earth, and wind and earth. It's incredible that that's the gematria. But I still wouldn't be so impressed, because of course it's gonna fit. Right? If those are the four personifications, the four realms of angels, and there's four categories within the earth, of course they're the same numerical value. But the Imrei Noam says that 955, which is the numerical value of Michal, Gavriel, Rafal, Nuriel, and Eish, Mayim, Ruach, and Afar, is also the numerical value exactly, and I didn't believe this, I checked it twice. V'Hashem berach es Avraham bakol. Those 5 words, V'Hashem berach es Avraham bakol, is exactly 955. Now, Gematrias don't tell you anything. They don't tell you. If you wouldn't already see the connection, then it wouldn't be there. But Hashem berach es Avraham bakol means Avram perfected himself to the point where he began this process of bringing the chariot of God into the world, which is why the correlation of the 955 representing the names of the 4 angels, which is the same numerical value as the 955 of Eish, Mayim, Ruach, and Afar, that's going to be Vashem Berach as Avram Bakol, as if to say Avram is beginning the process of bringing godliness into the world. Vashem Berach as Avram Bakol, Avraham completed himself to the point where he has now gone beyond where any human being has gone before. One small step for man. But Avraham has begun a whole new process. And therefore, the verse should be read as follows. Avram Zakim Baba Yamim, Avraham had accomplished all he could accomplish. Vashem Berach as Avram Bakol, to the point where he finished, and he is now beginning a whole new process of bringing God into the world. And at that point he says, if that's true, I better get Yitzchak started on his task of doing the same thing. And that's why this is the time that Avram, as if to say, the verse is saying, Avram was done, and now it's time for Yitzchak to begin. But I'd like to take this one step further, if we may. If we can. The Tiferes Shlomo quotes from the Zohar that says, Chesed Kel Kol Hayom. God gives kindness every day. But as we explained before, God cannot give kindness unless there is a vessel to receive the kindness. If there is no vessel to receive the kindness, what happens? That kindness, he quotes from the Zohar, stays stored up in heaven. God needed a good plumber because God was allowing chesed to come into the pipes to bestow on the world, but there was no one here to take it, and so it stayed up there. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, listen to this. There were 10 generations from Adam v'ad Noach. Why? To teach you how patient God is. That all the generations were sinning until he brought upon them the flood. That's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The next Mishnah. 10 generations from Noach until Avraham. To teach you how patient God is. That all the generations were sinning until Avraham came and received all their reward. So Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Avraham received the reward of all the previous generations. Why? Since when do you get other people's reward? Since when do people who sin give their reward away to someone who would come after them? Says the Tiferes Shlomo, what this Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is telling us is that God was giving chesed. It was flowing all this time, but there was no vessel to receive it. Avram opens up the channels, and he gets drowned in this overwhelming chesed. He gets 20 generations worth of chesed. That's why it doesn't say by Noach he received the reward of them all. It only says that for Avram. Avram receives chesed of 20 generations worth of chesed.
What does that mean that he received chesed? That he was given bakol? I mean,
he was given access to kindness from Hashem of the equivalent of all the previous generations.
So in other words, Hashem gave him lots of rewards.
Well, no, it was access to it. Right. Or he could pass it on. That's why Hashem says to Avram, you go to Eretz Yisrael, you do what you need to do, and everyone will be blessed through you, and those who are blessed, and I'll give you, and I'll do, and I'll do. All these promises Hashem makes to him, because Hashem knows that Avram is going to become the channel for chesed. And Avram didn't take all that chesed. So what does Avram do? Hashem berach has Avram hakol, he has all this chesed, so what does he say? I don't need it, so what am I going to do? I'll invest it in the future of my descendants. And so he says, I have all this access to all this chesed. We need to get a wife for Yitzchak, someone who will allow him to have, and as it turns out, they have that grandson Yaakov, who is that balance of chesed and gevura, and now the people in the world will have access to this chesed. He says, you can look at this, and I would recommend trying this on Shabbos by laning. Take a look and listen. How many times the word chesed appears in the story of Eliezer and Rivka? That word appears way too many times, even in places where it doesn't even fit into the story. I mean, you have the obvious places where he comes and he says, Hashem, my master, I say chesed im Adoni Avraham. Please do some chesed. In other words, don't do it for me, but do it for the sake of Avraham. So there it kind of fits. But later, he calls on, find the exact verse, when they agreed to, when she says, I'm the daughter of Besuel, and so he says, Baruch Hashem Elokei Adoni Avram, Asher lo azav chazdo va'amito me'im Adoni. Right? Blessed is Hashem, who has not abandoned the chesed and the emes from my master. And that those words are hard to translate. He should have just said, thank you Hashem for doing chesed. And he goes on, he says, find one more example. Va'ata im yeshchem osim chesed ve'emes es Adoni. He calls upon Lavan and Besuel to do chesed and emes, which is a strange thing. He's not looking for chesed, he's looking to make a deal. But the word chesed appears too many times because Avraham is sending Eliezer to find the continuity for the channel of chesed, and that's why the Torah emphasizes that word. Now, I'm going to tell you something, which it's not really a secret, but if you don't know it, there's no way for you to know it. And that is that the word bas, which we translate as daughter, actually has another translation. There's another meaning to that word. A bas is a vessel of measurement. We say bas alpayim amma, a vessel which is able to contain. And the reason why that is because all containing vessels are feminine. And a vessel meant to contain things which you're giving to is called a bas. Now, if you don't know this translation, then you'd never guess. But the fact is that the word bas actually means that. It means a measurement, a measuring vessel is called a bas. And so it says the Tiferes Shlomo, bas hoisa lo la'Avraham. Avraham had this container to receive all the chesed. He says, our sages used the word bas, maybe they were referring to a daughter, but they understood that those who know how to read the words of our sages and know how to not read everything so literal would say, well, one second, bas doesn't only mean daughter, bas also means a vessel of containment. So Avram had a vessel of containment, meaning he had access to all this chesed coming down into the world, and the name of this vessel was Bakol, because it had, what was the language of the Mishnah? At Sheba Avram Avinu, v'kibel schar kulam. Avraham came and received the word for all, which means all chesed from now on is channeled through Avram Avinu. Not just the chesed that his descendants receive, but Avram is now the channel of chesed. He's gone beyond, and that's why Avram Avinu comes to your sukkah on the first day of Sukkot, not just because it's a good day for him and it's on his schedule. Avram comes on the first day of Sukkot because the first day of Sukkot is the day celebrating the attribute of Chesed. So Avram is there because he is the attribute of Chesed. Avram doesn't show up on the first day of Sukkot. Avram is the first day of Sukkot, if that makes sense.
Why is the first day of Sukkot special?
The 7 days of Sukkot are Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, and so on. So, why is it that way? So the Zohar says, is because it says, Basukos Teshvu, Shivas Yamim. It shouldn't be Basukos Teshvu, Shivas Yamim. It should say, Shivas Yamim, Teshvu Basukos. So he says, it's Shiva Yamim, it's the 7 days which sit in the Sukkah. That's the Zohar proves it from the verse. Meaning the 7 days, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So Avraham is the first day of Sukkot because Avraham is no longer a person now, just the person. He's now a personification of a concept. We have just 2 minutes. I want to finish this with, this isn't just some concept that is beyond us. Okay, so we just learned that Avraham Zakim Baba Yamim actually means that Avraham perfected himself in this great realm and he's the channel of Chesed. And so what does that have to do with me? I'm not Avraham and I'm not a channel of Chesed, and certainly I'm not perfect. So hear this, because this is very important. The Gemara cites a debate between Shammai and Hillel. Shammai, the way he used to live his life was that he would go out into the market, and if he saw a cow, a really good-looking cow, and in our case, we don't buy cows in the market, but if you see a really good chocolate cake or tub of ice cream, and you really want it, so you shouldn't say, I'm going to buy this tub of ice cream and eat it. Buy the tub of ice cream and say, this is for Shabbos. But then you bought this tub of ice cream and you see it for Shabbos, and you put it away for Shabbos, you come home, you put it in the freezer. The next day you go shopping again, and you see a big chocolate cake. And you can't have a chocolate cake and ice cream. And the chocolate cake is better than the ice cream. So what Shammai would do is he would buy the chocolate cake, put that in the freezer for Shabbos, take out the ice cream and eat it on Monday. So that you were always, whenever you were buying something, you were buying for Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Hillel had a different midah, he had a different attribute. He would go every day, he saw the ice cream, he'd buy the ice cream and eat it, and say, this is how to serve Hashem with this ice cream. The next day we'd see a chocolate cake. What about Shabbos? What about Shabbos when we get there? Because Hillel used to say, Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Every day is a separate day. Every day I bless Hashem. When someone asks you how you're doing, and you answer Baruch Hashem, you're actually shortening what your real response should be. It's Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Blessed is Hashem every day. Says the Tiferes Shlomo, because as we know, Shammai is connected to Gevurah with stringency with Yitzchak. Hillel is connected to Avraham. When you live a life where you're channeling Chesed all the time, unlike Gevurah, which is to limit and put away for Shabbos, but when you live a life of Avraham Avinu, you don't put away for Shabbos, you don't set off doing something for another time, even though it'll make your Shabbos more beautiful. Baruch Hashem Yom Yom, every single day, every moment that you have, every opportunity. But Avraham Zakin Baba Yamim, you want to know how Avraham got that way? Avraham got that way by not putting anything off until tomorrow, by not putting off anything which you can do, by not saying that any day is more important than the other, but every single day. Some people choose one day of the year to celebrate everything that they have. But for us, it's Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. Every single day we wake up in the morning, we say, Modeh Ani, I give thanks for everything that I have. Vashem Berach as Avraham Bakol. And if we live that kind of life, if we live the life where we too try to personify as much as we can, perfect ourselves, by not putting it off till tomorrow, do right now the best thing that I can do, then we should merit that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can Yivarach Esanu, Hashem should bless us, Bakol, Mikol, Kol, we should have everything we want, long life and wealth and honor and prestige and everything else that is included within these blessings of Avraham, but also we should merit to perfect ourselves and fulfill our purpose in this world. Thank you.